Welcome, my name is Christopher Paisley. I'm a Philadelphia public school teacher. This is my YouTube channel, Inside White Fragility. Today, I'd like to talk about Cartoon Network's anti-racism indoctrination video. So the Cartoon Network wants to make sure that your little young children who are sitting in front of the television or computer watching their cartoons, they want to make sure that they're going to be able to indoctrinate them with identity politics, rooted in anti-racism, so that in case your child wanted to judge their friends or other people by the content of their character and by their values and core principles, if they wanted to just look at people as people, the Cartoon Network wants to make sure that make sure you don't do that. Make sure that you have to see color. Not only see color, but center color so we can remain fixated on color, identity, race, so that your children can become anti-racists and make sure that we end racism, I guess. So the name of this video is called See Color. The crystal gems say, be anti-racist. And here's the video.
Colorblindness is our game because everyone's the same. Everybody join our circle. Doesn't matter if you're white or black or purple.
What the? Whoa. Hold up a minute here. Ugh, who wrote this? I think it kind of does matter that I'm purple. I mean, I'm purple because I'm literally an alien.
Well, I'm not an alien, but it definitely matters to me that I'm black.
Yeah, it makes a difference that I'm white. I know the two of us get treated very differently.
I just think it's messed up to compare me being an alien to you two being different races. You're both human. You're totally biologically the same. Adding purple people into a lesson about human racism makes no sense.
Yeah, that is pretty weird. I think people like the black, white, or purple thing because adding a fantasy race in there helps distract from the actual racism black people have to deal with.
Right. My experience with anti-black racism is really specific. Other people of color experience other forms of racism too, but you won't see any of that if you don't see color.
Dude, so this entire public service announcement could be a ploy to avoid talking about racism altogether. Hey, can we get a rewrite where we appreciate each other without erasing what makes each of us different?
Okay, but it's gonna add a couple hours to the shoot.
I can
My
make it work.
speaker's open.
You were rolling just now, weren't you? Can't we just slap some graphics on this and call it a day?
So the first thing we notice is that the idea of race and color and identity are centered, and it's a very clear message. If you want to treat a person as a person, if you want to look past color to the content of the character, that's a big no-no, especially if you want to be an anti-racist. And of course, being anti-racist, interestingly, means pushing, in a way, racism onto children and making sure that they're fixated and focused on color. So let's take a look at some of the things that's wrong with this video, some of the problems. Number one, obviously, it completely disrespects Martin Luther King's dream, and a lot of progressives will say, you don't understand what his dream is. His dream really isn't about being colorblind. His dream isn't really about not judging a person by color and getting to the content of the character and the core values. You misunderstood his dream. No, he really wants you to look at skin color. He really wants you to judge a person by color, because that's the whole new thing. Colorblindness is really racism. It's called colorblind racism. So that's the whole idea of this video. So it disrespects Martin Luther King's dream. It says that we must center race and skin color over universal values in the content of character. And the one thing that it does do is that it uses a fallacy to mislead children, and it's called the fallacy of the false dilemma. And if you take a look at this video again, I want to go back to the part where the cartoon character says, if we don't see race, then we won't see racism.
My experience with anti-black racism is really specific. Other people of color experience other forms of racism too, but you won't see any of that if you don't see color.
Okay, that's actually a fallacy because it's an either-or choice. If you don't see race, if you don't choose to center race and identity, somehow you're not going to see racism, which is ridiculous because if you value the content of somebody's character and you see their core principles and their values, are they a good person? Are they tolerant? Are they honest? Do they love? Do they respect? If you see them being racist and disrespectful and intolerant, obviously it's violating universal values. Obviously you're going to see that that is racist. So just because you're not obsessed or fixated and you do not center race and identity does not mean you're going to miss racism. So that's a false That's a false notion that they're, of course, indoctrinating our young children with. So that's one thing. And then there's this idea that the white child is being treated different than the black child, and they really have to tell children this. You know, if you're this race, you're going to get treated this way. If you're this race, you're going to get treated this way. So they really have to plant that seed into their young minds that your color will influence the way that you act and interact and judge and get treated with people.
But it definitely matters to me that I'm black.
Yeah, it makes a difference that I'm white. I know the two of us get treated very differently.
It's almost as if they're suggesting that this is how you should think. Okay, it's planning that it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, if you're a black person, you're going to face all this anti-blackness, and if you're a white person, you're going to have all these privileges. So in a way, again, it is setting kids up to see the world through this lens. Now, I don't know how healthy that is. Now, obviously, if we see legitimate issues, children should be able to identify that. But to make sure that they're framing it this way is questionable. But here's the irony of the whole thing. They're saying that we must see color, and when you suggest getting past color to the content of character, they're saying that that's going to perpetuate racism. But if you look at the child of color and you look at the white child and you say, well, why aren't they being treated the same? Why are they being treated unequally? Well, the answer is because people are looking at their race and their culture and their skin color to treat them differently. So what might a solution be? Well, instead of looking at the person by their race and skin color and deciding to treat them differently, maybe you should look past that and look at the content of their character and their values and their principles and things like that. And then there's the whole other notion of this idea of black, white, and purple. This whole thing where we bring in the idea of the person being purple.
Everybody join our circle. Doesn't matter if you're
white or black
or purple. What the? Whoa. Adding purple people into a lesson about human racism makes no sense.
Yeah, that is pretty weird. I think people like the black, white, or purple thing because adding a fantasy race in there helps distract from the actual racism black people have to deal with.
Now, this is a Robin DiAngelo construct where she's all up in arms about people saying, I don't like it when they say black, white, or purple because purple's not really a race. And she has this whole part in her book, White Fragility, about how using the phrase, I don't see color, I don't care whether you're black, white, or purple, is dehumanizing, according to Robin DiAngelo. So we're not allowed to say that. We're not allowed to fight for color blindness. We're not allowed to say, I don't care whether you're black, white, or purple, because if you suggest that someone is purple, that's dehumanizing, and that's not anti-racist. That's not making sure that we can use skin color and identity to push our agendas. There's some other problems here. So what I want to do is I want to look at two different approaches to help people understand what's going on in this video. So there's two approaches. There's the classic Martin Luther King dream, I have a dream speech approach, which is what I call the principle-centered approach, which is based in universal values. Okay, this acknowledges race and celebrates diversity, so it does acknowledge race and it does celebrate diversity, but it uses principles and core values to interact and make judgments and to make decisions. So we see race, we acknowledge race, and we also celebrate diversity, but we move past race and we look at the core values and the content of character to make our decisions, to make our judgments. Okay? Then there's the Cartoon Network anti-racist identity-centered approach, which is based in race and skin color, and this basically denies the existence of universal values and uses race and skin color to interact, to make judgments and decisions. Yes, it uses skin color and identity to make judgments and decisions. That's called the identity-centered approach. All right? Now, if you look at the principle-centered approach, there's this false claim like they do on the Cartoon Network that we don't see race. Okay, if you believe in the content of character in King's dream and you believe in core universal principles and values which do exist, this doesn't mean that you don't see race. So this idea that we don't see race, we don't see racism, we're trying to pretend race doesn't exist, we're trying to pretend racism doesn't exist, it's a straw man argument. That's another fallacy because no one's making that argument. Okay, the reality is we're saying that we shouldn't judge people or make decisions based on race. For example, you go into a job interview. Do you want to look at the person according to their skills and resume, or do you want to make sure you see color when you're hiring them? Okay? If someone comes up to you on the street and they need help because their car broke down, do you want to judge them as a person who looks like they're trustworthy and safe and honest? Or do you want to make sure you see color? Do I want to help this person or not? Well, let me make sure I see color and judge them by their color, whether or not I want to help them. If your neighbor moves in next door and you want to welcome them, do you say, should I welcome them as a good person, as an individual with core values and with principles? Or do I want to make sure I see color with my neighbor and then I can decide if I want to help them or if I want to welcome them? Because remember, we have to make sure that we see color and use color to judge and to act and to interact. So this is the kind of game that is being played. Make sure you see color, okay? And then, of course, you have the identity-centered approach, where they say that they want to end race and racism, like they say in the video. If we don't see color, how are we going to see racism? But the reality of the situation is they want to center race because they want to use it for identity politics. See, race is a very valuable political tool to drive agendas. So that's really what this is all about. So if you look at the Cartoon Network and you really take a close look at what is going on here, you have two choices. You have King's approach, where you acknowledge race and you say, look, we know we have differences. We want to celebrate diversity, but we don't want to center it. We want to move past it to core values, to the content of character, so that we can act and interact and judge each other by these real values. Or you could do the identity-centered approach like anti-racists do, like the Cartoon Network does, where we center race and we make sure that we always see color so we can judge and act and interact with people according to their race and their skin color, which is just another word for racism. So basically, to conclude, perhaps the Cartoon Network could be honest. They could leave out these fallacies and this misinformation that they're choosing to use to indoctrinate children. Perhaps you don't give children a false dilemma fallacy, an either-or fallacy. Perhaps you don't tell children that they should fixate on race. Perhaps you should tell them that, yes, the natural instinct for you to treat your friends just as people is a good thing, and that if you are able to get to know someone well enough that you see past color, that's okay, that you should not continue to push identity politics. Perhaps the Cartoon Network could do something like that. But the reality of the situation is, if you do that, it's not going to forward identity politics. It's not going to forward this underlying political agenda associated with it. And if you do this, it's not going to make you a true anti-racist, which in reality is just another form of racism.